you basically create a holding company that would own the name, and then you license that for a dollar, or you license that to the restaurant to use. And therefore, the name is not owned by the restaurant. It's licensed by the restaurant. The investors don't own a piece of that.
Okay, so let's say things are going really well and I want to expand, right?
Yeah.
When considering expansion, what legal steps should I take to protect my intellectual property and ensure smooth scalability for that?
Great question. I think one of the biggest traps that restaurateurs fall into is the question that you're asking. And this goes back to how you're going to own the IP, right? So if I start, restaurant one, and maybe at that point there is no future for restaurant one, and all the intellectual property is owned by restaurant one, and I have investors in that restaurant. Okay. Let's say I want to, years go by, like you said, it's a success. I want to open up restaurant two, and I want to call it the same name. Well, who owns that IP? I don't need investors now. Restaurant one is such a success that the landlord is actually going to build me out a restaurant. So I don't need the investors. But the investors own that IP because it was never put off into a separate entity. So when you're thinking about, opening up a restaurant, you've got to understand who's owning that IP, and, what are your plans for expansion? You might not have any plans for expansion. You might just open and say, this is going to be a one-time restaurant. I'm calling it this name, and we're going to stick with this name, and that's it. No other locations. You might not feel that strongly. You might say, well, if this is a success, maybe I could duplicate it, somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So you basically create a holding company that would own the name, and then you license that for a dollar, or you license that to the restaurant to use. And therefore, the name is not owned by the restaurant. It's licensed by the restaurant. The investors don't own a piece of that.
Yep.
So,
that creates, is there a cash flow situation there as it relates to a payment for that licensing deal back to the mother entity?
Yeah. So sometimes it depends what the license deal is, right? So restaurant one that licenses the IP might not pay anything for it, or might get there might be a small management fee that gets paid to it, because usually the manager of the restaurant and the owner of the IP are the same party.
Yep.
But yeah, they don't participate. Now, when you go to sell the restaurant, there's things that you have to consider, because you're usually not cutting your investors out of the value of the IP. So if somebody says, I want to buy your restaurant for $1 million, and you're using this name in a bunch of different places, you're usually going to, treat your investors right and throw that name, the value of the name back in. Yep. So, you're not saying, oh, well, all the value's in the name, the investors, sorry, you don't own that. It's all mine.
Yep.
Well, that might be legally correct. It's not good form.